This story happens back in 2001. There was a big blizzard. I don't know if you remember this. But in Chicago, if you're from Chicago, there's lots of blizzards. But this blizzard happened to be one that was really impactful to my relationship. It ended up in the worst first kiss I've ever had or given to anyone in my entire life. We'll get to that in a minute. My wife, Megan, is not here. Is also a member here. Is about yay high, kind of petite brunette that I met in college at UIC, where Ken here is a professor. Maybe you were watching over that. I met her in a lecture hall. Now UIC, primarily built in the 60s, it's like a bunker. Right? It's not the most attractive campus of all the campuses. It's getting better. But these lecture halls are all kind of the same. Kind of those deep, like those, the lecture hall, the stage is at the bottom and it's cavernous. And the thing about UIC is that you could have a lecture hall that fits like 200 people with 70 people. So you kind of have this kind of sporadic layout where people sit. And people are pretty habitual. How many of you are sitting in a seat you commonly sit in when you come to this event, right? So the idea is that, you'd go into these places, and I had a technique when I went into these things. Because prior to meeting my wife, I had no intention of ever being married. I was having a good time in college. Right? So I had a technique of how I would approach a classroom. Number one, I would come into the class 15 minutes early. I would sit down relatively towards the back because, let's face it, I'm not interested in school here. I'm more interested in the strategic sitting pattern of the hottest females in class. So I would come into class 15 minutes early the first day, and I'd get in there, I kind of scope out everything, and I know that people are creatures of habit. So the next class, 2 days later, I would find where those kind of hot girls were sitting, and I would move a little bit closer to that area. Right? And then over the course of a couple weeks, I'd start a study group right in this area. And I would eventually be able to talk to these girls very non-aggressively, very like we're in this study group. Well, one of these classes happens to be a class for Megan's. And I remember, because this was a terrible class with a terrible professor, not all professors are terrible, this professor happened to be relatively boring. I'm reading something for another class, my friend's reading the Wall Street Journal, and it's, professor could care less if we're even there. And this girl walks up, and the first thing I noticed is a hot girl, and I put my head back in my book. But then I heard her speak. And she's a nerd. She was announcing something with student government. I don't know even if that existed in college, but she did it. And so she's standing in the front, and I hear her voice. And it stunned me in a minute. I looked up, and I elbowed my friend. And I'm like, that's the girl that I'm married. Now, no one believes me about this because I'm married. But I did. I elbowed my friend. My friend's like, whatever, goes back to the newspaper. And I start listening to her announce this thing called Ooze Volleyball, which is mud volleyball at UIC. It happens in the fall. And we decided that we were going to go do this thing because I've got to meet this girl. Right? So this is how I get introduced to the existence of Megan. Why? Right? Don't forget there's this blizzard that's happening a little bit later. As I move through this process, and I've created my study group, and I've now gone to my ooze ball and played some volleyball and met Megan, and I met her in a cafe. I ended up meeting Megan a second time in this cafe, and back at UIC when I graduated, there weren't a whole lot of options for places that you could go. So I would go hang out at the one cafe called La Tazabella, and we would go, and it turns out Megan lived right above La Tazabella, and there she is. So I invited her to our study group because she's a hot girl, and that's how I actually met girls. I would go and invite her to the group, and she ended up hanging out with us and talking to me all night long. After everybody had left, I knew that I got this girl. I'll tell you 2 reasons I figured out that I've got this. Number one, she already had a boyfriend. But this boyfriend came up in the middle of the conversation. You ever have those awkward interjections that someone gives you? Like where they're like, it wasn't even on that topic, and someone's like, well, I don't do that. Or, in this case, I have a boyfriend. Well, I never asked if she had a boyfriend, so I figured I got to her. I made her a little uncomfortable. That's good, right? So I said that was too bad, and we continued our conversation and I moved on. Now, it took a little while to crack the set, because if anybody's met Megan, Megan is not the type of girl that's an easy pushover in these particular circumstances. So, over and over, kept meeting with Megan, kept having these conversations, kept actually hearing about this boyfriend that she had that she never actually introduced me to. You ever feel like that? Like some girls giving the brush off where she's like, yeah, I've got this boyfriend. She totally made up. In fact, this boyfriend's name was Martine. Right? My name's Marty. Martin, actually. Right? So Martine is like my name, but slightly European or Southern American. Turns out he was Argentinian. I still never met this guy. I hung out with Megan 8 hours a day in some cases and never saw this guy. The only picture she could show me was a picture from Halloween where he's wearing a family outfit. So I called him a fan boyfriend. I'm like, he doesn't exist, you're blowing me off, what's going on here, right? So one day, she ends up breaking up with the fan boyfriend. Still, to this day, I've not met him. And it happens to be a day before this incredible blizzard that we're about to have that no one really knows about. And I kind of hear about this, I'm getting kind of excited, but I'm out visiting a friend in the western suburbs. And if anybody knows, I was out in Naperville, right? Naperville from Chicago, from UIC, is like a 20-minute drive with no traffic. With traffic, like 40-minute drive. With a blizzard in 2000, 2001, 3.5 hours. Let me tell you how I know this. So here I was in Naperville, I get this call. And Megan's like, my heat's out. And this is back when you had the little flip phone cell phones, right? And a charge that lasted 20 minutes. So she's like, I get this message about 2 hours later when I plug in my phone. I get a message immediately after that. Oh, it's okay, I don't want to worry you, I don't know where you're at. And then these messages are like 2 hours apart. So I look at my friend, she has no cell phone. 2000, she didn't have a cell phone. She doesn't even have a home phone at this point because we're in college and we're broke, right? So I look at my friend, and my friend's like, you're leaving, aren't you? I'm like, yes, I am. So I got in my little Mitsubishi GT and I drove 15 miles an hour in a blizzard for 3.5 hours with only one other car I saw the entire time besides the snowplows to finally meet her, to give her the worst first kiss that I've ever gotten. I was so nervous. But it doesn't matter. Because the moral of the story is this. If you meet the person that you're like totally head over heels in, do not expect this to go like a storybook. Do not expect a good first kiss. Do not expect the rest of it. But at the end of the day, that might be the one. And Megan was the one. Thank you.